Good afternoon. This is Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters. We're talking with artists of the Masters of the American West exhibition at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. This afternoon, we are pleased to have with us a new artist joining us at the Masters, Kathryn Stedham. She's a landscape artist from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Kathryn, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jim. I'm so excited to be part of the Autry Masters of the American West show this year. So
we're excited to have you and look forward to seeing you in person there. So, Kathryn, I like to start these things out by getting a little bit of an understanding about your background. Could you tell us about your creative, artistic upbringing?
Sure. I've been painting my whole entire life. I have kind of an untraditional background in that. I began painting with my grandfather, actually, when I was a child. And he was kind of what you call a toll painter. You know, back in the day, they painted kind of decorative things. He made furniture and painted signs. And so he really was instrumental in helping me develop a hand and eye coordination for drawing and also for painting from a very young age. In fact, I was like 4 or 5 years old and I was already saying that I wanted to be an artist, whatever that was, because I wasn't even really sure what that meant, except it meant that I get to do all this creative, fun stuff that I've been doing with him. And he introduced me to materials. You know, it was like, I remember my first jar of gesso, you know, a number 2 pencil as opposed to a number 4 pencil. I mean, it really started from the very beginning. And so I studied with him. I sold my first painting when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and I paint on the furniture. That the toll painting was the kind of like you'd paint on the furniture. It was like decorative furniture, and he sold the furniture. So I started doing that at a very young age as well. So, and kind of after that, my parents kind of introduced me to artists in the area, and they really believed kind of like in the mentorship kind of opportunity. So I met like working artists along the path, and my parents would hook me up with them to study.
Was this in Santa Fe or someplace else?
This is in Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, Norfolk, okay.
Where I lived on the coast. I actually lived on boats growing up. And so there'd be often like people coming in and out of the harbor, and they were coming in new. We'd find out they're an artist. So my parents would hook me up with them and ask them lots of questions about what to provide, you know, in terms of supplies. So I studied with some of those guys, and then I kind of entered some atelier type programs when I was in junior high. And then high school, I had a very unconventional situation that I was part of the graduating class of one of the first magnet school program. So Governor's Magnet School for the Arts. So I actually went to college.
Wow.
And so I was doing at Old Dominion University. I was there studying painting, and even in high school, and Norfolk State University. And in fact, my class was the first graduating class in the nation. It was a model program it was a pilot program for the rest of the magnet school programs in the United States. So I was really fortunate. I studied with a lot of artists along the way. So these people that were visiting instructors, even high school and then to college, were professional artists. And so I was always surrounded by other artists from a young age.
When you went into college, particularly with the scope of your artistic upbringing, were your instructors taken by your level of expertise at that point?
Yeah, I think they found it pretty unusual, and they were quite excited about some of the things I was doing. And I started doing some really kind of unconventional types of work and really pushing myself. And I would stay in the studio all night, and you know, I was a really dedicated student. And I was already exhibiting, so I didn't go to college till actually I took a break. Yeah, I took a break after high school and just was showing. So I started showing right out of high school professionally. And then I decided it would be nice to have, you know, a little bit of education there, higher education. So I went to West Virginia Wesleyan College and studied in the painting department. And it was a good experience. I really learned how to kind of put it all together there in terms of like
it's a very impressive upbringing. I've talked to a lot of artists about you know, where they've come from creatively, and not many you know, are literally drawing from the egg. if you will.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your professional career. How has that progressed for you?
Yeah, so I've been at it for about 30, 35 years. And my early beginnings were classical realism. So I studied like very classical types of paintings. And I was mostly interested in figure painting. So I was always painting from life. So from the very beginning, it was always gesture drawings and painting from life, painting from the figure. So obviously I went into like doing figure work and then kind of portraiture, that kind of thing. And then from there, I kind of wanted to push it a little bit in college. I started studying about other artists and I became really enamored with the German expressionists. I loved George Baselitz. I wanted to be kind of like, I saw something else like in the work that I wanted to explore. And that was kind of the emotive content of the work. And how do I get from this kind of academic approach to this kind of like having a feel for, creating feeling and connecting with the viewer through that. So I went into abstraction, and actually my career was such that I actually showed abstract work for a number of years. So it was probably like a good 15 or 20 years. And when I was living in the East, and I was a known abstract artist. And so my career took all kinds of weird turns, because then I came west in 2005, and I ended up in Utah. I was in Park City. And man, that was kind of a game changer, because there's some really hot painters that come out of Utah. I used to
You
say,
think?
I was
There are
like,
so many great painters in Utah.
oh my goodness. I used to say, is there something in the water or what?
Yeah, really.
And here he was amongst all these great painters. And it kind of made me realize I wanted to kind of explore my roots again and kind of come full circle. And then I was obviously inspired by the Great West. And I explored around for a while, and I wouldn't present my landscape paintings until I found my own voice. It was real important for me to have my own identity and not just follow someone else's identity, but really explore how I would articulate what I was seeing around me. And it really didn't come into kind of full fruition until I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I moved here 12 years ago and really just settled into it. And this has been my heart and soul ever since. And there was really no looking back. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of your landscapes. And we've got several wonderful landscape painters in the Masters, and we're very happy to add you to that group. Yours is a looser, more expressionistic style, if I may. Why don't we start off with Raven Tree Grand Canyon? Why don't you talk about that for a while?
Sure. This is an interesting painting, because friends of mine and colleagues of mine have often said, you're painting the Great West, why not the Grand Canyon? And I said simply, well, I'm not going to paint it because I've never been there. I mean, I've been a lot of places all over the world, as a matter of fact, and I hadn't made it to the Grand Canyon yet. And so one thing that kind of characterizes my work, all of the paintings that you'll see from me are places I actually stood in front of, like literally stood in front of them, because I don't just take a photo and just, off the internet. I really need to have the full experience of having stood there and kind of absorbed what that experience is, and then want to express it. So
when you're doing that, are you working up a study when you're there? You're not working on a full-size painting standing in front of it in plein air.
Yeah. So most of the time I'm working on studies, and I do a lot of plein air work, because I'm always like, it's always about direct experience or painting directly from life. So I really try to do it a lot of plein air. But oftentimes, I've been painting since I'm 53 years old. I've been painting since I was about 8, for real. So I have like a great muscle memory. I really do. And sometimes I'll go to these places and I'll literally just sit and I'll like absorb it. And I will literally memorize what I'm seeing, the colors, in kind of an unconscious way. Like I'm not trying to, I just let it in. And so I can kind of bring it up in my mind's eye as I'm working. So I spend a lot of time letting the place inside of, let it come from the outside in, like really letting it in.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of almost meditate and absorb these places. So
Dennis Doheny is an excellent landscape painter that is in the Masters, and he's talked with me in the past about just sitting there and watching how the light changes in order to figure out what's the best way to capture this thing. And my guess is that you're having a similar experience there when you're doing that.
Oh yeah, it's just my way of kind of just studying something new. If you,
Well, how was it to stand in front of the Grand Canyon?
yeah, someone told me, one of my colleagues says, nothing will prepare you for this. And they said, the first day you won't even be able to paint. It'll be so big, you won't even know where to start. And I said, yeah, I've been a lot of places. Okay, let's go on and see this thing. And I got to that rim, and I'll tell you what, all I could do was stand there with my mouth open. And you don't really know quite how to approach it in the beginning. And then, you start breaking it down and start seeing things. But that was the experience. I've had a lot of my colleagues say the same thing, that it's like, you'll spend a couple of days just kind of looking and being, and that experience was kind of mind-blowing, to be honest with you. And I'm expecting to go back and to keep studying that landscape and learning about it, so I can even better capture the essence of it. What I think is what for me is important about it.
Yeah. So True West has got an amazing sky. What's your story about this painting?
Yeah. So this was a painting of my backyard, my former backyard in Galisteo, New Mexico. Okay. When I moved to New Mexico 12 years ago, I actually ended up not first in Santa Fe, but in this town south of here called Galisteo. And this was literally like from my backyard. That would have been my view from my bedroom window. And I realized, I was painting, like thinking about the Masters coming up and thinking about the American West. And it's like, what is so great about, what is it about the American West that draws people here, and people are so intrigued by it? And a lot of it, I hear time and time again, and people enjoy this feeling of immenseness that's here, and the enormity of it,
Big sky.
Yeah. And then with that is the big sky. It's not just big land, it's big everything, big sky. So, I used to ride my horse out at my house. This is a view like from my horse in the backyard of seeing this big cloud emerge and feeling small in this landscape. And I just wanted to kind of see if I could paint a painting that would give a sense for what that feels like, standing there and feeling the sky so big, the land expansive, going out 360, and then kind of being among it, but also like you're putting the viewer and having that experience of feeling really small.
I could see a very small point where somebody is standing in front of this huge scene. Yeah. It's wonderful. So also big, sunset moonrise over Shining Rock. That's one big rock over there. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I'm looking at these as we go. It kind of helps me kind of re-enter them. But the story, it's a crazy story actually. This particular place, I was actually painting, plein air painting by the river, and I was facing the river, and I was painting, standing almost in the river painting and it would be the Rio Chama actually. And I was packing up and getting ready to leave when I turned around, and this rock formation behind me was catching that low angle light at the end of the day, and it just set it on fire. Yeah. And I turned around and I was like, well, there's the painting. That's it right there. It was behind me. I was so focused on what was in front of me that it just kind of blew. I wasn't expecting it. When I spun around and saw that, it was like, it just presented itself like, here you go, here you are. And I've actually painted in this location a number of times because I love this rock formation. And one of the paintings I did was actually called Monument to the Sun, because it was kind of like monument and then the sun on it. And in this case, I have the moon rising up behind it, which is kind of an interesting thing, because the low angle light here in the Southwest, you get this kind of low light that'll hit, it'll light, and at the same time, it's kind of going dark already. And then the moon is from behind it. And the shadow is shadowed in the foreground. So it's very specific that kind of light.
And also the skies start turning red and pink, and you get all these amazing colors in the sky. I'm a
Yeah.
photographer, and so I mean that's golden time. I mean, when you get that low angle sun, you get some amazing results.
Yes.
Finally, we've got your miniature Cloud Rider at Ghost Ranch.
Yes. So yes, this is my small painting for the show. And this is a scene that I was again on horseback at Ghost Ranch. So this is literally in Ghost Ranch. And I was on horseback, and there were some showers around us. So actually we got caught in the rain at a certain point, but I actually saw this scene, and it's looking back toward Ghost Ranch. So we're kind of on the west side, if I might get that wrong, southwest side. Yeah. And then looking back, and again, it's that low angle light, but at the same time, we have this big cloud kind of emerging behind it. And I'm just watching it change. It's just like, if you watch clouds for a while, they're not really, they're kinetic. They move, they change, they shift. Watching this kind of shape-shifting cloud. And I don't know, I really was interested in the relationship between the light, that little sliver of light that lit up the rock, and the cloud, like two forms that are very strong in one composition, and how it just kind of operate together. It's kind of a relational thing, the cloud shadow, and then you've got this area. So I kind of looked at it like I can be quite a formalist sometimes in my work. It's just like I really just enjoy those kind of juxtapositions. And so it was just fun. And also I was riding, and it was a memorable day, got caught out in a rainstorm on horses, and it was great. So I wanted to just,
well, they're all beautiful pieces. So notwithstanding turning around and saying, oh my God, the painting's back behind me. When you encounter a scene, what's the process you go through when you figure out this is something I want to capture?
Oh yeah. Well, I study it a lot. If I see something that I like, I kind of try to touch in with what about it struck me. So it's not just like how the mechanics of how to draw like this or paint this particular rock form or a particular cloud formation. It's more like, what is the overall mood, tone, time of day, the coloration, and that kind of thing. So as far as the nuts and bolts, maybe that's what you're more asking. The nuts and bolts of it is, I'll either sketch it, or sometimes I'll take a quick shot of it. I'm not a photographer, so I actually try to take terrible photographs on purpose, because I don't want good photographs. I want to paint from like little thumbnails. So I can do thumbnails, or I put together some sketches, and I try my best to remember what it was, and kind of, I'm weird to come up with these like kind of adjectives that describe it. And so I'll go, like powerful, loose, light, and whatever element is most important. Then I come back to my studio, and I paint very strangely, because I've been painting for so long. I don't sketch. I don't use a pencil and sketch things out or anything like that. I just immediately start painting. And I paint what's called the ground up. I paint an underpainting, which I use a limited palette in my underpainting, and I go dark to light, which is classical oil painting style. I mean, if you look at Caravaggio or Rembrandt, I don't paint any differently than they paint. And so I work it up. And so most of my work, when you see it in the show, you'll notice that you'll hopefully notice that it's many, many layers of paint, even though it's very expressionist and loose sometimes. There's one subsequent layer that I cover up completely until I bring the light out. So I paint from dark to light, very classical style.
Okay. So you've had an exceptionally long lifespan as a painter. Has your process evolved over this time?
Yes, actually quite a bit, because I keep not really necessarily reinventing myself, but I keep trying to find new stuff in it. And so I challenge myself, because I paint, when I'm here, I paint 7 days a week, and I'm in the studio here, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day. So I have to keep it interesting. And so I think some of the stuff that happens for me is I've been painting for so long, I like to break all the rules. So, I'll have some paintings that compositionally, I'll just kind of like, put a tree right dead center, and I'll do things in a form, and that is not traditionally done, in terms of like, golden triangle or whatever. I'm doing things, it's like, I want to put that dead center, and then I've got to deal with that space, or I make it symmetrical. The other thing I do is I put the wrong colors down, and then automatically, when I put the wrong colors down, I will balance it, because my brain operates in a way that says, oh, that's not quite right. It creates tension in the painting. So I have to kind of balance it. So I use these kind of like, I call them devices or something. I don't know if that's my word for it, that I find these little things where I kind of keep challenging myself a little bit. And I can paint backwards. So sometimes I won't paint dark to light. I'll paint a little bit light and then go into the darks, because it creates a different kind of tension. So sometimes I'll intentionally do things incorrectly. Yeah, I do all kinds of stuff. I'm kind of working back and forth with finding new things in the work. So I'm always experimenting. I really like the paint. I'm very tactile, so I want to see how far I can push that paint, basically.
Well, I hope you stick with the West as your subject matter. I see a woman on a horse back behind you on the easel. And maybe we'll have an opportunity to see you explore some of that subject in future exhibitions. But I thank you for taking some time to talk with us today, to share with us information about your background, and hope that we'll see you in less than a month in February, at the end of February, at the Masters of the American West.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really looking forward to it, and thanks for having me on, and look forward to meeting everyone.
Very good. Thank you, Kathryn.